So our worship theme this month is body and spirit, and our particular topic today is healing of body and healing of spirit, and of course those two things often go together. And as luck would have it, I'm sick. So I got some kind of a nasty cold last week, and it moved down into my lungs, as it often does with me. And since I've had mild asthma ever since my childhood, that's triggered a lot of coughing and wheezing, and so I appreciate your forbearance today. So Friday night was particularly bad, and Suzanne was saying, maybe it's time to go to the ER, and I said, if I do that, they're just going to put me on a nebulizer machine. And then I remembered we have a nebulizer machine. We have like a little home nebulizer machine. So let's do that. So I got that out, and about twice a day I get out this little, plastic machine, and I turn it on and put in the medicine and all of that. And it opens up my breathing. So it is keeping me out of the ER while I get better. And that is pretty amazing, right? This little plastic thing and the medicine that goes into it. I didn't have that growing up. I just had the little plastic inhaler thingy, which I'm also using. So since we're talking about healing, I wanted to open the service with a shout out to all of the health professionals who make modern medicine possible, including little plastic thingies with medicine and vaporizers. So for all the doctors, nurses, pharmacists, EMTs, x-ray technicians, surgeons, oncologists, dentists, and so on, and all the scientists and researchers who stand behind them, opening up new avenues of diagnosis and treatment. You are saving a lot of lives and helping a lot of people, and I want you to know that it is appreciated. This culture sometimes has a love-hate relationship with doctors, so today I would hope that you are feeling a little bit of love. Thank you for what you do. I also want to give a shout out to people who work with the body in other ways. So, yoga teachers, meditation leaders, physical therapists, masseuses, trainers. Shout out to the holistic healers. Shout out to the doulas. All the people who help those of us who happen to have bodies make our way through the world. Thank you for everything that you do. Now, most of us are probably not workers in those fields. We're not licensed and commissioned to be healers of the body. And since this is a church, we're going to be talking a lot about healing of the spirit. But I did want to mention that two ways that we can, all of us, be healers of the body, at least in a small way. So I offer this for your consideration. If you've never thought of yourself as a healer, just think of this. Okay, so first let's talk about my home vaporizer thingy, the little device that is keeping me out of the hospital. I was able to afford it because I am fortunate enough to have decent insurance. And with my decent insurance, it was not particularly expensive. There are plenty of people who don't have decent insurance. And the reality is that everyone is able to access all of this good life-improving and sometimes even life-saving medicine. People can't get basic prescriptions that they need. If you've ever been on Facebook and listened to people talk about, how am I going to manage the fact that I need this medicine and I don't have it? Or maybe people get medicine and they split it in half and they give half to their children and half to themselves because that's what they can afford. People can't get basic care that they need. And that is a scandal in a nation that's wealthy. It is a scandal that people cannot get basic care that they need. There are plenty of kids who get asthma, like I did, and they don't have access to that basic care, and they do end up in the hospital. And we know that children of lower income are more than twice as likely to end up in the hospital from their asthma. And that is preventable, and it is avoidable. So we're in the middle of a national debate about our healthcare system. And that debate is complicated. And it involves weighing all kinds of trade-offs, and that can get really technical and really abstract. But it is important to step back from all of that abstraction sometimes and remember that this is a conversation about healing. And this is a conversation about access to healing and who will have access to healing in this country. So it is a really, really important conversation. It's not an easy conversation. I'm not saying there's simple answers. But one of the ways that we can all be healers is by holding up a vision of generosity for our nation, that all people have access to basic quality health care. However we fix this mess, we can hold up a vision that one requirement is that all people have access to basic health care. And in that way, we can all contribute to healing. And I hope that your voice is being heard. The other way that we can be healers in some small way is by remembering to breathe and helping others remember to breathe. So let's just do that. Let's take in a breath and let it out. And take in one more and let it out. And I didn't cough that time. That's pretty amazing. Right now there's a lot of anxiety in the air. There's a lot of fear in the air. And fear is a powerful emotion, and in the immediate moment it triggers a fight and flight response, and over time it settles into your body and it lives there, and it is bad for your health. It's bad for your health. Fear and anxiety are also contagious. We transmit these emotions to one another through our words, through our demeanor, sometimes through our Facebook posts. And in answer to fear, we have breath. We have breath, right? We can stop and recognize that it's time to breathe. So I suggest that make a practice of sitting with your body throughout the day. Just kind of check in with yourself physically. And if you feel that fear and that anxiety or maybe anger or whatever it is that's kind of settled in your body, recognize it, name it, right? It helps to name it. I'm feeling anxious right now. And then take a few breaths and let that go. Because if we're able to get to a calm, non-anxious space and carry it with us, then we can help be a calming presence in the room. Because calm is also transmitted person to person. So we can lessen each other's fears and anxieties, which is a healing thing that we can do for each other. And we will probably have to take turns with this. Because no one can be calm all the time, especially right now, right? That would be asking way too much. Suzanne and I try and work it out so that whenever she's flipping out, I'm the calm one. And whenever I'm starting to North Korea, she's the calm one. And we can kind of talk each other back down from that. So we need an anxiety buddy system, and that's the beauty of being in community. We can be that for each other. So if you can project a calm, centered demeanor, know that you are having a healing influence on a room. Now, most of us are more likely to be recipients of healing than providers of healing. We're all riding around in bodies, and sometimes our bodies break down, or they fail us in unexpected ways. Childbirth puts stress on our bodies, sometimes profound stress, and eventually we all have to deal with the effects of aging. And in doctor shows, people show up at hospitals, right, and they've got a condition, and maybe it's life-threatening or whatever's maximum drama, and the doctors all rush in and do their stuff, and 40 minutes and a dozen commercials later, the person is fixed, and they get back on with their life. And that's how most of us grow up seeing healing. There's a crisis, there's a solution, and everyone gets on with their lives. But in real life, healing is often incomplete, or it is partial, or the healed body is not the same body as it was. And what comes after healing is something that we don't talk about a lot. And the realities of aging we don't like to talk about, and certainly the realities of childbirth we don't like to talk about. So oftentimes, we're unprepared for the loss of control and the disruption that comes with illness, or with the whatever bodily drama we're dealing with. And that can be very disorienting. But then after the healing, we're still dealing with this process that we didn't know that we were going to be dealing with. And the world looks different to us than we thought that it was going to look. And that can be very disorienting. So with illness or with body trauma, there come a lot of emotions that need to be processed, like fear and grief and anger, anxiety or depression, right? That's part of healing, and often an unacknowledged part of healing that has to be done. And then there also can be a loss or a change of identity that physical healing doesn't even countenance, because I thought I was going to be healed and go on with my life, but the reality is the world looks very different to me now, and I have to reinvent myself or reinvent how I do things. And so you're going on this journey of healing that is not as smooth and easy as you thought, and that's a spiritual question that you're dealing with now. Who am I on the other side of this journey? So healing can raise profound spiritual issues for us. And it takes time, and it takes its own time. And so it's natural for us to be impatient with our own healing. It is unfortunate, but human nature, that we are sometimes impatient with other people's healing. Again, the sanitized view of bodies and healing that we get from the media doesn't help with this. And then we may be totally unprepared to deal with the spiritual question that waits for us on the other side of healing, or waits for our partner on the other side of healing. So if you are dealing with illness or body change that maybe came on you suddenly or has been different than you were expecting, I want to say today, be kind to yourself and give yourself time you need as best as you are able. Because, of course, the world is going to come rushing in with its responsibilities and its expectations, and probably none of us ever get the time that we really need. But also there's a desire to kind of get on with our own life, and there's a frustration and an impatience. So I would say healing comes on its own time. Give yourself that time. And if you are a caregiver, understand that healing has multiple dimensions, and the body may be in one place and the spirit another. So be generous in your patience and recognize that even if the body is well or better, there may well be a spiritual dimension that still has to be addressed. Be generous in your patience with yourself and with others as you can be. So here's a story about patience and healing. And I'll warn, it's not a happy story in its beginning, right? So there was a girl who experienced sexual abuse at a very young age. And she named her abuser, and the abuser was convicted of the crime and then later killed, right? So it's a very violent story, and as a result of these violent events, the young girl became convinced that her words had the power to kill because she had spoken a name and that person had ended up dead. And so she stopped speaking to anyone except her younger brother. She was sent to live with her grandmother where there was some stability, and she still refused to speak there, and for 5 years she did not say a word. And the adults around her began to believe that she had basically lost her mental capacities because of what she had suffered. But her grandmother would sit with her every day, and she would brush her hair, and she would braid her hair. And as she brushed her hair, she would whisper into her words, "Your mama," meaning her grandmother, "your mama don't care what people say. When the good Lord is ready, you're going to be a preacher. You keep reading that poetry you read, and you're going to be somebody." And every day she would brush her hair and say that. "Your mama don't care what other people say. When the good Lord is ready, you're going to be a preacher." And then one day that girl did speak, and she was Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou, who wrote, "Now if you listen closely, I'll tell you what I know. Storm clouds are gathering, the wind is going to blow. The race of man is suffering, and I can hear the moan, because nobody but nobody can make it out here alone. Alone, all alone, nobody but nobody can make it out here alone." That story comes from Elaine Crawford's book, Hope in the Holler, which is a book about dealing with hope from a womanist perspective, which is an African-American female perspective. And hope can be a powerful healing force. And Maya Angelou names her grandmother's hope and love as having sustained her and healed her. So when we're in that dimension of healing, Maya Angelou's body healed years before her spirit healed. And when we're in that in-between space, the hope that we can have for one another and the love that we can connect to one another can be a powerful healing agent. And I hope that none of us will ever experience or have never experienced anything so traumatic. But these are traumatizing times. From the horrible shooting in Las Vegas to the racist violence on display in the streets of Charlottesville, the state violence people of color deal with every day, wars and threats of wars, the accelerating pace of natural disasters, right? These are times of incredibly heightened anxiety and uncertainty and tension. And I can tell you, some days I can deal with it, and other days I feel like I am just kind of wilting under this omnipresent badness, because every week it is something worse than the week before. And so we're having to process like shock, Never thought that would happen. Never thought I'd see that. And then grief and anger over and over again. And it is unhealthy, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, to be in this constant state of shock and grief and anger. It is harmful to the person. So this is a time when we are all in need of self-care, of healing energies in our lives. So first of all, I want to remind everyone to make a regular practice, if you do not already, of unplugging. If you are a news junkie, if you are an iPhone addict, if Twitter is your constant companion, that is not healthy for you. So set aside regular time to turn it all off. Right? I would be remiss if I did not say that. But as I was thinking for this service about healing and self-care, and especially about communities of healing and communities of care, I discovered this fascinating article in The Guardian that dates back to February of 2015. And I want to thank Angela Powell Ramirez for sharing it on her Facebook page. Proof that I am not completely off of social media. Because, like, what am I going to do waiting in line at the store? Like, talk to people? So anyway, this article is about, it's about attempts by Westerners to bring mental health care to regions of the globe that have experienced traumatizing events, right? So this is places where there have been, like, terrible hurricanes, earthquakes, wars, civil wars, or like despotic governments, really bad stuff that leave mental health problems and trauma in their wake. So Western people are coming in to help assist with healing this mental health trauma. These are mental health professionals. And what they're discovering is that while mental health problems exist universally, they present very differently in different cultures. And they are understood very differently in different cultures. And so for some kinds of problems, Western approaches have proven very beneficial. For example, if someone has schizophrenia, that can be treated oftentimes, pharmaceutically with a drug. And if you give that person drugs, their schizophrenia gets better. For some women who had experienced certain kinds of trauma, group therapy, where they were all talking to each other, worked fairly well because for the first time they had a safe place to tell their stories. And that turned out to be a powerful healing event for them. But in other cases, Western approaches were not helpful at all. And in particular, Western psychological practice tends to involve sort of talk therapy, right? Get us one-on-one and let's talk about it. And that was not working very well. So here is a Rwandan describing their experience of Western mental health care to a researcher, Andrew Solomon. Okay, so this is a Rwandan talking about dealing with Western mental health care. He says their practice did not involve being outside in the sun, where you begin to feel better. There was no music. There was no drumming to get your blood flowing again. There was no sense that everyone had taken the day off so that the entire community could come together to lift you up and bring you back to joy. Instead, they would take people one at a time into these dingy little rooms and have them sit for an hour or talk about bad things that had happened to them. We had to ask them to leave. So in thinking of communities of healing and the church as a community of healing, I note that we employ some of these same basic tools that the Rwandan was talking about, right? Music, sometimes drumming, time set apart from life's ordinary cares when we come together intentionally, and that we come together to lift another up and to bring joy. So at its best, this place can be a healing space. And then churches employ these tools of music and drumming and singing and candles and time together, not just to lift us up, but also to root us and anchor us, to connect us to something larger than ourselves, which could be tradition, it could be community, it could be our Unitarian Universalist values. But being anchored in this way is a very powerful foundation for healing, especially when there's a spiritual dimension to that healing. If you're dealing with, who am I in this new space? Or who am I in this country that seems to be falling apart around me? being anchored is a powerful support for healing. I was reading a book called Days of Destruction, Days of Revolt, which is about the authors visit places where the cultures are under a lot of stress, and particularly where people have been displaced. And they were interviewing people to learn about their lives. And one of the places that they visited was a Lakota reservation in South Dakota. And obviously these are people that have been displaced. These are people that had their culture forcefully removed from them through assimilation. And it's a community with a lot of problems, right? 80% unemployment, chronic addiction, domestic violence, and all this kind of stuff. So there's a lot of hurt people in this community, and there's a lot of need for healing. And they interviewed a particular woman who had had a lot of issues similar to her community. She'd struggled with drug addiction, she'd been a victim of violence, and she wasn't doing well. And what got her back on track was she went to a traditional Lakota ceremony. It was like a sun ceremony. It was like 4 days of drumming and singing and traditional Native American worship. And that began to pull her out of where she was at and pull her into a new space. And in particular, she said, it grounded her because she had returned to the traditions of her people that had been taken from her. And when she was in those traditions, she was connected to all of this history and all of these other people and all of these forces, and then also connected to the earth through the ritual. So she was grounded, and that was the beginning of healing for her. And she observed that whenever anyone in that situation, in that reservation, broke that cycle of poverty or addiction or whatever it is, it was almost always because they had returned to their ancestral traditions. It was almost always because they had rediscovered the spiritual traditions that had been taken from them. And that was their path to healing. Because we're not meant to be isolated and unsupported, and we're not meant to be disconnected from our traditions and from those primal forces. Nobody but nobody can make it out here alone. But religious community, including this one, can connect us to a living tradition, a network of values. And in the case of UU, that tradition is a healing tradition because the values that we connect to are kindness and compassion and acceptance and dignity, and those are healing values. And then our faith also includes as one of its sources of inspiration earth-centered traditions. So our faith encourages us to seek out that rootedness, not just in our own tradition and in our community, but to our earth. Right? It says, seek out your connection to the earth, to the ecosystem, to wind and water, to the great web of life. Nurture that relationship. Honor her. Take time to be with her and sit not just with your ancestors, but with the ecosystem that has nurtured you and your ancestors. And reconnect to those ancient rhythms. And if we can do this, we bring another level of rootedness into our spirits. And that is healing. And of course, our earth needs to be healed as much as we need healing. So this is a mutually supportive relationship. So I invite you to think about this place as a community of healing. And if you need healing, set that intention when you come here. In all that we participate in today and all that I do today, may I be open to healing. And if you can bring love and kindness into your body so that you can be present to one another with love and kindness, you can also set the intention, may I be a vessel of healing if there is someone here who needs healing. And the reality is we all need healing. So I'm grateful for this community. I am grateful for this tradition. And I am grateful for all of you who have come here to be a part of this great tradition.